How do you consume information? Why are you inclined to go to the sources that you go to? Most of us don't actually ask ourselves these questions, opting instead to learn passively and choose sources from force of habit. We should aspire to be conscious thinkers when consuming information, but because at best we forget to think for ourselves and at worst we don't care to, Dennis Prager has seized the opportunity to do the thinking for you. Hello humans, I'm Dan from the internet, and I go to UC Berkeley, a real school. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Prager University, not a real school. But this is bigger than one man or a single YouTube channel. This is about the hijacking of American discourse happening at the blink of an eye at scale on the endless feeds of our existence. This is about an ecosystem of cunning evangelists who shamelessly proclaim to be the last remaining champions of free speech and the marketplace of ideas. This is how Prager is poisoning politics. Dennis Prager started doing radio in the 1980s, preaching that Judeo-Christian values have played and must continue to play a dominant role in American history, society, and politics. After all, nothing is more un-American than the separation of church and state. My last two pieces centered on Ben Shapiro, who repackages tired right-wing talking points in exactly the way you'd expect from a lawyer running damage control for a dimwit. P.S. This report features Ben Shapiro and a puppy, so stay with me. Prager, on the other hand, is nowhere near as sophisticated or subtle, something you'd quickly realize by browsing some of his written columns, such as "When I was a boy, America was a better place," "Is Donald Trump a misogynist?" and "When a woman isn't in the mood." Part 1. In The Atlantic, Connor Friedersdorf chronicled Prager's complete 180 on Trump and his many transgressions: profanity, adultery, lying, torture, and basic moral character, which is really funny coming from the Judeo-Christian values commentator who has spent his entire broadcasting career claiming that the left is grabbing America by the morality. But back to you. As a consumer of the younger, more secular internet, you probably aren't in the older, more religious target audience for Prager's radio show. Chances are, and by watching this you're giving me the data, you're under the age of 35 and enjoy this brand of flashy sub-10-minute informational content that's become dominant for disseminating knowledge. With this in mind, PragerU was created to spread nationalistic propaganda in 5-minute chunks. That's not my hot take, that's almost their mission statement.
In 5 focused, entertaining minutes, cutting-edge media and marketing on our side for a change. Each week, we teach what isn't taught, but should be. Why America is exceptional. How capitalism promotes economic equality. How faith, reason, and science are fully compatible.
For time's sake, let's ignore the fact that a history major who left college in 1972 believes more than 40 years later that his extensive experience in talk radio puts his finger right on the pulse of campus climate in the 21st century. Visitors to the PragerU channel will find hours-long playlists categorized in the vein of real college majors. It's not a real school. PragerU's economics track teaches that income inequality is a good thing because it rewards success. PragerU won't tell you that the top 1% kept 24% of America's income in 2016, and that the US is way behind other Western countries in economic mobility. A philosophy major with no science background presents one of their environmental science videos, Why You Should Love Fossil Fuels, which claims that the climate science community is largely skeptical about humanity's role in rising global temperatures. They aren't. He also argues that humans are mastering nature by continuing to use fossil fuels. Solar, wind, nuclear, and other renewable energies, not mastering nature. Dinosaur juice, mastering nature. PragerU on race relations, you ask, for some sadistic reason? Of the interestingly few videos they have on the topic, one is the same tired whitewashing of history that Republicans use to veil the Southern strategy, in which the party deliberately courted racist Southern Democrats to gain political power. It's a part of Republican history that many party loyalists magically have amnesia over, even though in 2005 the party chair himself acknowledged and apologized for it. Prager cherry-picking from the 7% of African Americans who identify with Republicans is a textbook case of the old "I'm not a racist, my son has a black friend" ploy. I chatted with Marcus, who hosts the Uncorrupted Report on YouTube. Subscribe to it because he's intelligent, skillful, and goes into more depth debunking PragerU than I ever really want to. He helped me get a sense of the patterns in PragerU videos.
They pretend, and they always try to make it seem like they respect the other side and that they've actually considered the other side and that they aren't approaching a topic with confirmation bias.
He explains.
Yeah, and if you watch all PragerU and you're more inclined to the right, I think this is ultimately their main goal, is to make it seem as though right-wing conservatism in general is sort of perfect and that everything bad that's ever happened has been a cause of the left.
Thanks to the addiction algorithms YouTube, Facebook, and other online platforms utilize to show you more of what you want to see, this warped, unrealistic message can reach millions of young minds. It works so well because of something that Prager has understood about politics long before PragerU fans were born. Which reminds me of something. I promised you a puppy, and I try not to disappoint. So here's Ben Shapiro with a puppy awkwardly sandwiched next to his lap while Dennis Prager lights a cigar. Not much seems surprising. Shapiro even does the thing again.
Not to brag, but the most widely listened to conservative podcast in America.
But this exchange actually had me shook.
By the way, is it fair to say that I had a role in your life prior to your being born?
Yeah, absolutely. My parents started becoming Orthodox in that direction by listening to your show.
So I have a long time in the Shapiro family. Really.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, I listened to your show from the time I was capable of listening to talk radio, so...
Which is, with you, was what, about 3?
Well, in utero. Yeah,
utero.
Everyone's political beliefs, yours and mine, come from our deeply held morals. When religion becomes intertwined into political conversations, political beliefs must satisfy moral/religious ones, giving pundits the opportunity to either swap out actual evidence for values and history or misconstrue the evidence to fit a worldview. Matt Grossman and David A. Hopkins, real political scientists, published a book called Asymmetric Politics that contextualizes this well. Yes, they talk about how university professors, scientists, and journalists tend to lean left. Yes, this bias holds true for me. But shifting to the right, they found the GOP actually used to have a neutral view on the press. Then, in the 1960s, things got shaken up. Republican Party activists and evangelical leaders attacked the press and fanned the flames of tribalism. Arizona Senator Barry Goldwater took on this strategy for himself, clinching the presidential nomination in 1964. The party's elites saw the political gain that could be achieved by eroding public confidence in research, the media, and universities. Not only have they been going at it ever since, they've been creating their own entities to replace the ones they're trying to destroy. Now, PragerU is not an accredited institution, but it is part of a larger apparatus that's built to serve the interest of billionaires and corporations. I'm not saying there's some elaborate conspiracy just because Dennis the Menace chuckled while ruminating about his lifelong influence on rising Republican talking head Ben Shapiro in a literal dark smoke-filled room. The evidence is almost as conspicuous though, and I forgot to tell you, there's money in it too. Ben Shapiro, Adam Carolla, Steven Crowder, and Charlie Kirk, just to scratch the surface, are all contributors to PragerU, sharing and growing each other's audiences by weaving the same message into their respective shticks. Crowder reaches over 1.5 million people on his personal YouTube channel, which has featured Prager numerous times. He's also not funny. Change my mind in the comments, trolls. Carolla hosts a popular podcast and is collaborating with Prager on the documentary No Safe Spaces, the kind of campus publicity stunt that more and more college students are beginning to see through thanks to content like this. Why not share this video? Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA, which boasts the weakest meme game of all time, received $275,000 over a 2-year period from conservative mega donor Richard Uihlein, who is a top donor to the super PAC of unpunished child molester for Senate Roy Moore. Uihlein has already donated $14.8 million in 2018 according to the Center for Responsive Politics, and the midterm election season has just barely started. Remember philosopher bro Alex Epstein from that fossil fuels video? He's the president and also founder of the Center for Industrial Progress, a rare for-profit think tank, which was also in a subpoena against ExxonMobil in 2016. ExxonMobil's CEO at the time was Rex Tillerson, Trump's freshly ousted Secretary of State. Dan and Ferris Wilks, who sold their fracking company in 2011 for $3.5 billion, donated to help start PragerU, and they might have gotten a return on their investment. That ridiculous fossil fuel video was literally made possible by fossil fuel billionaires not like you. The brothers also own and fund The Daily Wire, Shapiro's news outlet which happens to stand against scientific consensus on climate change. In the Republican Party machine, the super wealthy dump money into think tanks, interest groups, media outlets, and campaigns to put their fingers on the scales of our political system. Republican-tested, big business-approved talking points vertically integrated into our political discourse, all with the same underlying message: trust no institutions but ours. The icing on the cake? Many of these donations are tax-deductible. It's privatized propaganda being pumped into the brains of America's next army of voters in a way that George Orwell couldn't have dreamt up if he dropped 10 tabs of acid. The right wing has made a caricature of Berkeley and college campuses at large. The news vans aren't here when things are business as usual, when professors are exposing tomorrow's future leaders to the complexities of our society. Numerous avenues exist for students to express their views, for the public to commend or critique. The same is true at all universities, at least the real ones. But PragerU is not a university. It's a nexus for hardline conservative messaging that closes minds and builds upon tribal identities while accusing political opponents of doing the same. It's a vicious cycle that can put violently extreme ideologies just an autoplay away. Humans, this is serious. Carefully consider how and where you consume information, and don't allow those with financial or political motivations to make those decisions for you. You don't need to imagine what it might be like to live in a world where people rejected all but their own sources of information. We live in that world today, and your diligence is more important than ever.